I love cereal. No milk! What am I going to do? You cannot have cereal without milk. Fortunately, I know where to find the answer. And that is in this book, Fortunately, The Milk. Written by Neil Gaiman. He is the author, a very famous author. He writes children's books as well as books for adults. You may have heard of Caroline and the Graveyard books. Both very good books. If you haven't read them, read those as well. This is a really short book and it's all about finding milk. We'll have a look at the plot and then I'll let you know what I thought. Unfortunately, The Milk. Fortunately, The Milk. This is a story about a family. And at the beginning of the book, we see the mother leaving to go to a conference. But just before she goes, she makes sure she lectures her husband on how to look after the house and their children. Of course, he knows it all already. So off she goes to her conference and everything is going swimmingly well. Unfortunately, things take a turn for the worst the next morning. You see, as the children come down for breakfast, it turns out that there is no milk for their cereal. And the father doesn't seem too bothered about that until he realises that that also means there is no milk for his morning cup of tea. No problem though, he says. He says he'll just pop to the shops and buy a nice pint of milk. So off he goes. And the boy waits patiently for his cereal. And he waits, and he waits, and he waits. And finally, his father returns, looking slightly dishevelled, but with a pint of milk. He then tells his children why he is so late. And it turns out it is not just because he got chatting to someone in the shops. In fact, he was abducted by aliens. And after he had escaped those terrible, nasty beasts, he was captured by pirates. Arr. And after he was forced to walk the plank, well, he wasn't forced, it was more his idea. And just as he was on the end of the plank, he got saved by a professor in an air balloon. Not just any old professor though, he was a time-travelling stegosaurus. And this book chronicles the adventures of the Professor Stegosaurus and the father as he embarks on his noble quest to return to his time zone and his home with his pint of milk. What more of a noble quest is there? And that is the story of Fortunately, The Milk. Fortunately, The Milk. One man's quest to retrieve a bottle of milk for his children's cereal. What a noble quest. This book is like, I always thought when I was reading it, that it was like that moment when you're asked to write a story about anything you want. And suddenly something in your brain explodes and you get like, what do I include? I know, I need to include everything. I want pirates, I want ninjas, I want aliens. They're going to go to the moon, they're going to get kidnapped, then there's going to be helicopters, and then they're going to defeat the helicopters, he's going to kick him, then they're going to go to the bottom of the sea and they're going to find the hidden treasure, and all of it just comes spewing out. And that's what this book's got. However, it is written well and the humour on it is spot on. It is a silly story. It is a silly book. And it's just an exercise in having fun with imagination, I think. I do like Neil Gaiman as a writer. And I think his humour's spot on. I really like his humour. It chucks it in the... You know, this book, I think, is written for a much younger audience. However, the mark of this author, and a mark of a good book, is it also appeals to anyone really. There's moments when I found myself giggling to myself at the basically the humour, the jokes, the situations that the characters get into. It is a short book and I'd highly recommend it. And that humour that comes out, I think, I've just picked one instance which I thought, this is just what I find funny. Perhaps you don't. So there's two characters who are talking about the problems with time travelling, okay? And the professor, who is a stegosaurus after all, I mean, why not, says to his friend, according to my calculations, if the same object from 2 different times touches itself, one of two things will happen. Either the universe will cease to exist, or 3 remarkable dwarves will dance through the streets with flower pots on their heads. That sounds astonishingly specific, I said. I know, but this is science, and it is much more probable that the universe will end, rather than the dwarves. I thought that was brilliant, and it really reminded me of this book. I think Neil Gaiman shares the same kind of humour and writing style as Terry Pratchett, who is actually one of my favourite authors, and it really comes out, that sort of humour that's silly but also clever at the same time. So I'd highly recommend this book, and it's not particularly long, but it's a sort of, it's just this imagination. It's a really good fun book, but written well with great humour. You know, we're not talking about depth of character in this kind of book, and it doesn't aim for that. It aims for a fun experience. So I personally think it would appeal to most ages. I think it's aimed at a younger audience, maybe parents reading to children, but I think anyone would have fun with, fortunately, the milk. I would highly recommend this as your next page. And plus, at the end, there's milk for the cereal, which, as I mentioned at the start, is really important. I love cereal.